Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Viviana Hager. Viviana Hager, a 42-year-old chartered accountant, lived with her husband, Jamie Anguita, a builder, and their 2 daughters in a beautiful home in an upscale area of Puerto Varas, Chile. Jamie and Viviana were introduced through relatives. After moving to the area, Jamie initially stayed with a friend close to Viviana's home until she completed her internship. They did not communicate often, but when they finally met in person, Viviana was around 25 years old. Their friends noted that they had different personalities, which further confirmed the idea that opposites attract. Jamie was described by those who knew him as reserved and not very sociable. In contrast, Viviana was lively and outgoing. She grew up with her mother and siblings, as her father tragically died in a car accident caused by intoxication when she was just 1 year old. Viviana's mother chose not to enter another relationship, believing it was not right to bring a new man into their home. She single-handedly raised all her children. The wedding of Jamie and Viviana was grand and held in an elegant banquet hall. Jamie revealed that it had been challenging to win over his future wife. They spent their honeymoon in the Dominican Republic. Shortly after, Viviana became pregnant, but unfortunately, she could not maintain the pregnancy. In 1996, she gave birth to a daughter. They went through another unsuccessful pregnancy, but that did not affect their relationship. Later, they welcomed the birth of their youngest daughter. After the birth of their second daughter, Viviana decided to take a break from her job at a large carbonated drinks company to focus on raising their children. There were many rumors about Jamie and Viviana's relationship after 18 years of marriage. Some claimed they had a perfect relationship, remaining a loving couple and a stable family. Others suggested that their life together was not as ideal as it appeared. On the morning of June 29, 2010, everything seemed normal at first. After breakfast, Jamie took their daughters to a local language school before heading to work at his construction company. However, Viviana did not clean the dishes from breakfast, nor did she open the curtains to let in light, and she skipped several other usual tasks. According to data on the calls made, Viviana called the school where her daughters studied several times, as well as a photo studio, and contacted representatives of a company that cleaned stoves. Jamie also made a series of calls, one of which was quite unusual. He called his wife's phone at 7:48 a.m., and the conversation lasted less than a minute. Later, he stated that he had called his wife to say goodbye that morning, as he had allegedly forgotten to do so before leaving. In the afternoon, at 1:36 p.m., Jamie was at a bank branch when he received a call. According to Jamie, the caller did not introduce himself and said that Jamie should listen to him if Jamie wanted to see his wife again. The man then heard a woman scream, after which the call allegedly ended. Jamie's statement suggested that he perceived it as a prank or scam, which might explain why he didn't act as most men typically would. He didn't try to contact his wife to find out if she was okay. A few hours later, Jamie's eldest daughter called him and said that her mother hadn't picked her up from school. The girl also mentioned that she was planning to walk home. The path from the school to their home ran through safe areas, but for some reason, Jamie asked her to wait for him. Even after that, he still didn't attempt to contact his wife. On his way to school, Jamie stopped at a small police station to report a mysterious call and his concerns about Viviana possibly going missing. Shortly after, he received another call from his youngest daughter, who had made it home and told him that her mother was not there. She went into her parents' bedroom and found a terrible mess on the bed. Several items and documents were taken from her mother Viviana's purse. The girl also noticed that a small safe, some cameras, and jewelry were missing from their home. After speaking with his daughter, Jamie invited Viviana's older sister, Monica, to stay with his youngest daughter. This time, Jamie made no attempt to contact his wife, despite the seriousness of the situation. When he returned home, the police were already there. They believed that Viviana might have been kidnapped. Gradually, more agents gathered at the house, bringing the necessary equipment in case the kidnapper contacted one of the family members to demand a ransom. By evening, law enforcement officers had thoroughly searched the entire house. They also examined nearby plots of land that could have served as escape routes for the attackers and reviewed a list of residents in the area. However, they found nothing suspicious, which led Jamie to ask them to leave. He expressed concern that their presence was frightening his daughters, especially since they had not received any ransom calls during this time. As a result, the authorities began to consider the possibility that Viviana had left home voluntarily. However, the phone calls she made on the day she disappeared suggested otherwise. She had not taken a change of clothes or any important belongings with her. Consequently, law enforcement concluded that she was likely no longer alive. They searched nearby empty houses, sheds, rivers, and reservoirs, but these efforts yielded no new leads or evidence regarding Viviana's whereabouts. Jamie took various steps to locate his wife, publicly offering a generous reward for any information about her. Unfortunately, these efforts proved ineffective as the investigation continued. It became clear that Jamie and Viviana's relationship was not as perfect as it appeared. Jamie openly admitted to having cheated on his wife multiple times, revealing that she was unhappy in their marriage. For several months, Viviana learned about Jamie's actions accidentally. Out of revenge, she began dating another man. At the same time, Viviana was struggling with depression and had sought treatment. A close friend of Viviana, Jan, informed the authorities about Jamie's abusive behavior towards her. When the police questioned Viviana's boyfriend, Edward, they discovered that he was still in a relationship with her. Edward became a suspect in the investigation, primarily due to the lack of other leads. Eventually, the authorities reached out to Jamie again. They informed him that they planned to conduct a new search of his property, this time using specially trained dogs. Jamie was very interested and inquired about the effectiveness of these methods. The police officer explained that the dogs could identify human remains with almost complete certainty, especially if they had prior experience. Noticing Jamie's genuine interest, the officer invited him to the training facility to see the dogs in action, and Jamie gladly accepted the invitation. Soon after, he visited the facility and learned that dogs could detect human remains even if they were buried up to 3 meters deep. Experts stated that the chances of dogs confusing human remains with those of other animals were zero. Just before the planned search at his house involving the dogs, Jamie himself called the police to request their presence. This call occurred on August 9th at 6:55 p.m., 42 days after Viviana's disappearance. Jamie testified that he detected a strong odor coming from a storage room located behind a wall in one of the bedrooms. When he looked into that room, he saw the silhouette of his wife. However, strangely, he did not go in to check if she was there, which is puzzling because he should have felt it necessary to do so. He reported finding his wife at 6:34, yet it took him over 20 minutes to call the authorities. After 15 minutes, the police and forensic experts arrived. They had been instructed not to leave Jamie alone and not to allow him to take any action at the crime scene. Jamie reiterated that he followed the strong odor, which led him to the storage room behind him and his wife Viviana's bedroom wall. However, this raises a perplexing question: how could this hidden room exist? Notably, it was not included in the original house plans he provided. However, the police officers who worked at the house in the early days after Viviana went missing stated that they had checked the place. They affirmed that they had searched it but did not find anything unusual. Several notable discoveries were made. A safe containing over $1 million pesos was missing, a torch similar to the one used by the miners was found, and there was a fragment from an alternate version of the Bible or a similar document. How did these items end up in the storage room? The bedroom itself had also changed. For instance, next to the entrance of the storage room where Viviana's body was found, there appeared to be an altar adorned with various religious symbols. However, this was not the most peculiar discovery. In the initial weeks, law enforcement officers were present at the house but failed to thoroughly investigate one particular room, which was the most likely location for concealing Viviana's body. Despite the police's lack of attention, a puzzling question arises. Why did the strong odor from the decaying remains only become noticeable on the 42nd day? How could no one have detected it earlier? Additionally, why didn't Jamie, who had been sleeping near this room, notice the smell sooner? It is also concerning that Jamie discovered his wife's body just a day before a planned search involving dogs was to take place at the house. This leads to further questions. What if investigators considered the possibility that Viviana chose to end her life voluntarily? During the autopsy, no signs of foul play were found. There was some speculation that she might have ingested a drug previously discovered in the house. However, if that were the case, why did Jamie readily accept the idea of his wife ending her life? Initial forensic examination results showed no signs of external abuse on Viviana. However, the unusual position in which she was found puzzled experts. Viviana was lying down with her hands raised and her legs bent awkwardly. This posture suggested that she had not simply fallen but rather that someone had placed her in that position. Her relatives were dissatisfied with the autopsy findings and struggled to accept the explanation of a voluntary death. They believed that her husband was responsible for her demise. In their quest for justice, Viviana's family hired lawyers and filed a lawsuit against Jamie, who remained notably indifferent, even at Viviana's funeral, where he showed no emotion. In December, a lawyer representing Viviana's family assisted in bringing charges against her husband. He requested that authorities exhume her remains for a second autopsy, which was conducted in March 2012 by the Metropolitan Forensic Medicine Service. This second autopsy revealed that her wrists had been previously tied with a rope that had been removed after her death. Additionally, experts theorized that Viviana's body had remained in the same location for an extended period without any movement. They also noted possible minor injuries to her head and neck, which might have resulted from targeted blows, a fall, or strangulation. Despite these new findings, the exact cause of her death remained undetermined, and experts were still awaiting the results of a toxicological examination. The legal representative for Viviana's family believes that the injuries on her body suggest she may have been strangled. However, Jamie's lawyers argued that the injuries occurred because Viviana, experiencing suffocation from poison, instinctively grabbed her neck before she died. In 2015, a new suspect was introduced to the case, Jose Perez Mancilla. Jose, a man who has a criminal history, was born in Puerto Varas. He could not complete his education and had to leave school in the 5th grade to work as a combine operator harvesting wheat. In 1980, Jose's family sold some land and moved to Puerto Montt. Those who knew them said this family was not very social and often had arguments. As an adult, Jose worked as a carpenter. Eventually, he left Puerto Montt for Ancud, where he married Clara Ruiz, and they had 2 daughters. However, their relationship was tumultuous. Due to financial issues, Jose frequently had to relocate, sometimes disappearing for months and then returning as if nothing had happened. One of his daughters described her father as a cruel man who often abused her, her sister, and their mother. She claimed he frequently confessed to committing crimes. Eventually, the family fell apart. In 1999, Jose's brother got him a job at a construction company partly owned by Jamie. Since then, Jamie tried to keep Jose close by assigning him various tasks, leading to frequent visits to Jamie's home. Law enforcement traced a call that Jamie received on the day Viviana disappeared. The call was made by the man believed to have kidnapped her. This call originated from an internet cafe. Employees at the cafe provided a description of the caller. Authorities quickly concluded that Jose had reached out to Jamie. They arrested him on December 8, 2015, and Jose quickly admitted to the crime, stating that he had killed Viviana at Jamie's request. According to Jose, Jamie had offered him 5 million pesos to make Viviana disappear completely. During the investigation of the case, Jose recounted that on the morning of June 29th, he knocked on the door of Jamie and Viviana's house, and Viviana welcomed him inside because she knew him well. He stated that he had been sent by Jamie to retrieve some tools from the garage. After she led him to the garage, he attacked her, threatened her, and forced her to go upstairs to the storage room, where he killed her. Although most of Jose's testimony seems plausible, there are inconsistencies regarding Viviana's location. He subsequently admitted to stealing some of Viviana's personal items before leaving to call Jamie and fabricate a story about a kidnapping. As a result of this testimony, Viviana's husband, Jamie, was arrested. His oldest daughter, who was studying in Germany at the time, returned home and defended her father. Jamie's defense argued that Viviana had been a victim of a robbery rather than a contracted murder, claiming that José's account was fictional. However, the fact that José did not take money from the safe undermined the robbery theory. Further investigation revealed that José claimed Jamie had paid José in haste because he suspected the police were following him. Jamie gave José an envelope with only part of the agreed payment. Despite this, José did not pursue confrontation, fearing repercussions. By then, over 7 years had passed since Viviana's death, and all involved had been interviewed. The prosecution maintained that it was a contracted murder, while the defense asserted it was merely a robbery. In 2017, the court reached a verdict. José Pérez Mancilla was sentenced to 10 years in prison for robbery and the murder of Viviana. To everyone's surprise, Jamie was acquitted and released from custody after a lengthy jail term. Justice system representatives indicated that the prosecution lacked solid evidence beyond the testimony of José. Had Jamie been found guilty, he would have faced a life sentence as the alleged orchestrator of the crime. After the verdict was reached, Viviana's family told those involved in her death that this was not the court's final decision. Jamie and his daughters filed a lawsuit against the Chilean state, claiming negligence by officials during various stages of the investigation. Additionally, Jamie's representatives criticized the pressure he faced while in detention and sought nearly 1 million Chilean pesos in compensation each year. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Courtney Schulhoff. Courtney Schulhoff was born in 1987 in Florida to Stephen and Tracy. While details about her childhood are limited, we do know that her parents divorced when she was young, which was a challenging experience for her. After the divorce, her mother moved out and Courtney stayed with her father. Eventually, Stephen faced significant financial problems, which led to their move. In 2003, Courtney attended Lyman High School. She was a hard-working student at first, but after her parents divorced, her grades began to drop rapidly. She rarely attended school, stopped trying, and became a poor student. Outside of school, Courtney's personality also changed. She began hanging out with a group of friends who were known for bad behavior, which negatively affected her. Tensions between Courtney and her father Stephen escalate, forcing her to temporarily move in with her mother Tracy. However, this arrangement does not last long. Tracy cannot accept the changes in Courtney, so Stephen has no choice but to welcome her back home. Once again, Courtney and her father face unresolved issues, including her difficulties with school. During this time, Courtney and her friends often gather at the racetrack across from her school, where she meets and begins dating a 20-year-old college student named Michael. Michael Morin was a former high school football player who, unlike Courtney, had performed well academically. He received straight A's and was now attending a nearby college. His parents had high expectations for him, but everything changed after he met Courtney. After a few weeks of talking, they began spending all their free time together. Courtney's father, Stephen, was extremely upset about her poor grades, and this only intensified when he learned about her decision to be with Michael. He quickly started blaming Michael for this choice. Their relationship was already strained, and this situation made it worse. Courtney felt that her father didn't want her to be happy. She tried to explain that Michael was a good person, but Stephen refused to see him in that way. He had heard rumors about Michael being involved in car theft and wanted to caution Courtney that no matter what Michael did, he would never earn her father's approval. After a series of arguments, Courtney began to accuse her father of being abusive, and there was some evidence to support her accusations. One day, when Courtney invited some friends over, including Michael, her father Stephen came home earlier than expected, leading to an altercation. While Courtney and her friends were drinking and smoking, Stephen suddenly entered the room. Enraged, he yelled at his daughter for throwing a party without his permission. After a brief argument, Stephen punched Courtney in the face in front of her friends. The situation between Courtney and her father, Stephen, remained tense. Although Courtney had stopped going to school, she refused to find a job and frequently used her father's credit card without asking. She would come home with new clothes and items purchased online. By this time, Stephen's financial situation had worsened, making things even more challenging. For several months, Courtney continued her troubling behavior, often sneaking Michael into their home at night while her father was asleep. Eventually, Stephen prohibited Courtney from seeing her boyfriend, but she ignored his wishes and invited Michael over whenever she pleased. Every conversation between Courtney and her father focused on his harsh criticism of Michael. As the months passed, the situation became increasingly difficult. One day, Stephen checked his bank account and noticed some money missing. He called the police, reporting his daughter to them, apparently to teach her a lesson. After speaking with the police, Courtney returned home, now much more afraid of her father. She began to see him as strict, unkind, and a real threat. She devised a plan, determined to break free from Stephen's control. By the end of 2003, Stephen was in a relationship with a woman named Elaine. During this same time, Courtney was working towards earning her high school diploma while continuing to date Michael. Frustrated by Courtney's father's efforts to control their relationship, the couple decided to run away. However, they faced a major obstacle. Neither had a car or any money. Their plan was to take Michael's father's car and drive to Maryland, where they could ask Courtney's grandparents for financial assistance. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Michael stole his father's car, but while on the way to Maryland, they changed their minds and turned back home. This decision led to serious consequences for both Michael and Courtney. Michael's parents reported him to the police, and he was charged with car theft, resulting in a 70-day. Furthermore, Michael's parents insisted that he end his relationship with Courtney, believing it to be detrimental to him. This relationship was indeed harmful to both of them. Michael was forced to break up with Courtney, but he refused. As a result, his parents decided to kick him out of the house, leaving him homeless. He began sneaking into Courtney's apartment to sleep there, something he had done occasionally before, but now happened every night. Additionally, Michael dropped out of college, changed his address to Stephen's, and put Stephen's phone number on his parole application without Stephen's involvement or permission. Although Michael had nowhere to live, he made no attempt to find a job, which left Courtney to pay all of her father's credit card bills. When Stephen attempted to talk to his daughter about her mounting debt, an unforeseen tragedy struck first. On February 10, 2004, Elaine, Stephen's new girlfriend, attempted to call him multiple times, but he didn't answer. Concerned that something might be wrong, she decided to go to his house. Between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m., she drove to his place and was surprised by what she saw. Michael, Courtney's boyfriend, was walking down the street with Stephen's dog, wearing one of Stephen's t-shirts. Feeling uneasy, Elaine got out of her car and approached the front door of Stephen's house, where she found Courtney standing by the entrance. Elaine tried to enter, but the door was locked. She asked Courtney where her father was, but Courtney said she didn't know and left without opening the door, taking the key with her. Elaine saw that Stephen's truck was still parked in its usual spot, which made her even more worried, so she decided to call the police. When the local police arrived, they quickly obtained a search warrant following Elaine's phone call. They entered the house through the back door and began their search, uncovering a horrific scene. Inside Stephen's room, they found blood splatter on the walls. The most shocking discovery was Stephen's body in a plastic trash can. He had a severed ear and a disfigured face. It was clear that the perpetrator didn't bother to hide their actions. Additionally, the police found several bank statements on the dining room table, many of them circled in pen. Meanwhile, Courtney was missing. Elaine learned of the altercation between Stephen, his daughter, and her boyfriend, so the police quickly began a search. The police found Michael in the restroom of the mall across the street from Stephen's house. As Elaine said, he was wearing one of Stephen's t-shirts and had Stephen's wallet, car keys, and credit cards in his possession. The police took Michael in for questioning. After leaving her father's apartment earlier that day, Courtney simply went to her mother's house, where her mother made her turn herself in. During questioning, Michael initially insisted that he knew nothing about the murder. Michael claimed that after being kicked out of the house, he had been living in Courtney's closet. One day, when Stephen returned home, Courtney woke Michael up and told him that her father had found out he was staying with them. When he asked Courtney why, she said she would explain later and asked him to walk the dog, which he did. Michael ran to the mall because he was worried that Stephen would find out he was near his home. However, after the police informed him of Stephen's death, his story changed dramatically. He began to cry and said that after Stephen tried to confront Courtney about the missing money on his credit card, she asked Michael to kill Stephen and he agreed. His story shifts from being unaware of the death to saying he was asked to kill Stephen. Courtney's interrogation was also unproductive. She gave two different statements. In her first interrogation, she blamed Michael entirely, claiming she had no knowledge of her father's death until he informed her. In a later confession, however, she revealed much more information to police. Courtney maintained that the murder was Michael's idea and admitted to helping him by removing Stephen's dog from the room before the incident and placing the bat by the bedroom door. She said she heard everything while Michael killed her father. But by the end of the trial in September 2006, her story had changed dramatically. Courtney was convicted of murder. When asked if she had any final statements, she maintained her innocence throughout the trial but stated that she wanted to publicly acknowledge that Michael Morin did not kill her father. She took full responsibility and agreed to her sentence. This shocking admission took everyone in the courtroom by surprise. However, Courtney's stance changed less than a year later. At Michael's trial in April 2007, where he faced the death penalty if convicted, Courtney did not repeat her previous statement that she was solely responsible for the crime and that Michael had nothing to do with it. Ultimately, Michael Morin was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. In 2017, Courtney Schulhoff was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Although both men involved were punished, the exact details of the case remain unclear. It was confirmed that Stephen was killed with a baseball bat, but it is still unclear which of the two did the killing. Courtney did not confess to killing her father, but Michael did. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing, and the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, he suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter. But he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine, and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believed that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christopher Sutton. On Sunday, August 22, 2004, the Sutton family experienced a devastating tragedy following Susan's 57th birthday celebration. The celebration included Susan, her husband John, their son Christopher, his girlfriend Juliet, and family friend Teddy Montoda. After the party, Susan and John went to bed in separate rooms at their home in the upscale Coral Gables neighborhood near Miami, Florida. One night, a tragic event occurred. Susan usually slept in a separate room because her husband, John, snored loudly. While they were sleeping, a car stopped about 4 blocks away from their house. A man dressed in black was approaching their house with the intention of killing Susan and John. The attacker was armed with a 9mm Glock pistol and broke into Susan's house. He first went to John's bedroom and shot him twice in the head. He then moved to the room where Susan was sleeping, shot her 6 times, and left. The police were notified of the incident. Police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, doctors determined that Susan, 57, had died. John was still alive but had suffered serious injuries and had lost a lot of blood. He was taken to hospital, where paramedics worked frantically to save him, although his chances of survival were slim. Before being taken to hospital, John said that he could not see the shooter in the dark and did not know who it was. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned neighbors and searched for surveillance cameras. Although no cameras were found, but neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man dressed in dark clothing running away from the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer had accessed the home through the sliding glass doors. The house was intact, with no money or jewelry taken, indicating to police that this was not a robbery. The attack was clearly targeted at killing Susan and John. But the motive behind the murder remains unknown. Melissa Sutton was 18 years old when her parents were attacked. As a freshman living on her own, she couldn't attend the celebration at their house. She was devastated to learn about her mother's death. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to see her father in the hospital. She described him as looking very unwell. John had miraculously survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head, leaving doctors astonished that he was still alive, although he remained in serious condition. When John woke up in intensive care, he realized he was blind. Additionally, he was experiencing severe shock. He felt unsafe in the hospital, constantly fearing that the killer might return. This left John feeling endangered. He was eager to leave the hospital and find a safe place to hide. His fears were taken seriously, so a guard was assigned to his room, and police patrolled the area around the clock. Due to the severity of his injuries, John was also unable to hear anything. He didn't hear the shots fired at his wife and was unaware of what happened to Susan. As he slowly started to recover, he asked Melissa how his wife was. She did not answer because the police had advised her not to say anything that might upset John further. He later found out that his wife had been murdered by her attacker. The news was a huge shock to him. Susan's death was a huge loss for the whole family. She had devoted her life to being a loving mother. Susan spent many years as an intensive care nurse, a respected profession in the United States. Her career ended in the late 1970s when she decided to stay at home with her husband, John, after the birth of their first child, Christopher. They made this choice because Susan had been unable to conceive for 7 years, at which point they decided to adopt a daughter, Melissa. The police discovered that John had built a successful business and may have had enemies. They also learned that he had received previous threats of violence. The police investigated everyone who had had animosity toward John and Susan, but they all had solid alibis. While the police searched the crime scene for evidence, they discovered that Susan's purse, jewelry belonging to her or her husband, were still intact. Although these items were visible, the police planned to interview John, but he had difficulty communicating. However, he was able to provide some useful information. Although he could not identify the shooter, he recalled seeing a dark figure at the door. The attacker may have been dressed all in black or may have been African American. John could not be certain in the darkness. Unfortunately, this information was not useful to the police. The police decided to speak with Teddy, a family friend who was at the party before the shooting. They visited his house for an interview. Teddy explained that he was on the phone with Susan at the exact moment the shooting happened. He heard a gunshot, followed by silence. Feeling frightened, he called the police, got into his car, and rushed to the Susan family's home, arriving just after the police. Teddy was very shaken by the attack on Susan. However, the police found his account unusual. They questioned why he was still talking to Susan when everyone else had already left the party, leading them to suspect an affair. Teddy clarified that he was not just a family friend but also a business partner. He claimed that they were discussing an urgent business matter and that he frequently communicated with both John and Susan to handle various issues, so he didn't find his late conversation with Susan abnormal. During the conversation, Teddy told the police that the shooters were professional and trained shooters. The police found this information interesting and took Teddy's gun for testing. Teddy was also called into the station for a lie detector test. The police believed he was hiding something and continued to question him. Teddy eventually confessed that he was in a romantic relationship with Susan. The police have often seen love triangles that can lead people to commit terrible acts. However, Teddy's gun did not match the weapon used in the attack and his phone was tracked to a location far from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Teddy denied any involvement in the attack on John and Susan. Although his lie detector test was deemed inconclusive, it was suggested that his anxiety stemmed from trying to keep his affair with Susan a secret to avoid damaging his relationship with his friend John. John had a strong and trusting relationship with Teddy. Shortly before the incident, John and Teddy received one of the largest payouts in their law firm's history, over $1 million, and they celebrated this occasion extravagantly. Teddy was ruled out as a suspect, and the police decided to investigate other family members instead. An examination revealed that John could not have physically inflicted the shot on himself, so he was not considered a suspect. Their daughter Melissa has a solid alibi because she was in another city and also passed a lie detector test. The police then investigated Christopher Sutton. He had a girlfriend named Juliet. They had attended a family party together. Christopher quickly claimed that he and Juliet had gone to the movies the night before and provided their tickets as evidence. Juliet confirmed his story. The police then requested the cinema's surveillance camera footage, confirming that they had indeed gone to the cinema that night and confirming their alibi. After leaving the hospital, John moved in with Christopher so he could care for him for a while. However, disturbing evidence was discovered that Christopher actually wanted to kill his parents. He even threatened to kill his mother during a fight. Christopher became the prime suspect in the case. Additionally, Christopher had a criminal record that included vandalizing a teacher's home. When Christopher was 16, his parents, John and Susan, decided to send him to a reform school. Christopher was aggressive and had trouble controlling his anger, which made it difficult for him to socialize with other teenagers. He changed schools at least 6 times. He often skipped school. John would drop him off at the main entrance, walk to the door, but then Christopher would sneak out through another exit and go do his own thing. However, his absences were not his biggest problem. He also got involved in some criminal activities. One day, he and a group of friends broke into a teacher's house, causing damage and graffiti. As a result, Christopher was arrested and the teacher filed a lawsuit against him. The damage was estimated to be in excess of $50,000, and his parents had to pay it. Christopher's family had no financial problems and could easily pay the fine. However, His family was frustrated with their son's out-of-control behavior and did not know how to handle him. Christopher was a difficult teenager who had no respect for adult authority. His rebellion began with his love of piercings and tattoos, which his parents strongly disapproved of. Despite their efforts, they were unable to change his behavior, which led to more problems. One day, Christopher pointed an unloaded rifle at his mother and sister, threatening to kill them. Shortly before Christopher's 16th birthday, Susan discovered a note in his room that outlined a plan to kill his parents to inherit their money. Susan informed John about the note, and they confronted Christopher, who dismissed it as a joke. However, when his parents saw the note, they became frightened. From that point on, they were afraid to be alone with their son in the house. They even sought legal help, which led to a court-ordered rehabilitation program. Staff from a specialist organization forcibly transferred Christopher to a rehabilitation facility on the island of Samoa called Paradise Bay. It is a strict school for troubled youth. In 1998, when Christopher first arrived at this institution, his behavior became extremely aggressive, leading to him being restrained. Following this, he was taken to a remote camp in the mountains, where he was left tied up. The staff aimed to re-educate him through these strict measures. Typically, such severe discipline was effective and helped even the most challenging cases to improve. After spending a year in a behavior correction facility, Christopher sent his parents an emotional video message. In it, he described the violence he experienced there and accused his parents of not loving him for sending him to such a place. Upon hearing this, his parents visited institutions for troubled teenagers in Samoa but found nothing wrong. As a result, they did not believe Christopher's claims. They knew about the strict rules in place and believed they were intended to benefit troubled teens. Furthermore, Christopher was there under a court order, so his parents could not take him away. However, Christopher still hoped to leave the facility when he turned 18. John then received the court order stating that Christopher would remain in custody. The program at Paradise Bay was extended for another year, which surprised Christopher. But he had no choice but to remain at the facility. In 2000, Paradise Bay was closed after management faced multiple allegations of youth mistreatment. Christopher finally returned home on his 19th birthday, after 30 months at Paradise Bay. This situation raised concerns for the police, as his anger at being mistreated could be considered a motive for murder. After enduring such torture, Christopher may have felt the urge to take revenge on his parents. However, after returning from Paradise Bay, he changed. Christopher always showed that he had become a caring and calm son, especially in how he took care of his father following an incident. John could not believe that his son could be involved in the case, believing that Christopher had changed. However, the police suspected that Christopher had orchestrated the double murder, which was only partially successful because his father survived. Although Christopher had an alibi, he may have hired someone else to carry out the crime. The police needed to gather evidence to support their suspicions. So they brought him in for a second interview. In this conversation, Christopher reveals details that have not been revealed to the public and remain confidential. Christopher said he went to the scene of the incident. He saw the shooter walking down the hallway, and his mother Susan had been shot 6 times, information that was later confirmed during the investigation. Christopher also recounted the order in which the shots were fired and other key details. While Christopher appears distraught and cries over his mother's death, the police believe he is lying and is actually a criminal. However, Christopher was supported by his girlfriend Juliet, who also seemed shocked by the incident. She said she herself had been in shock for a long time, following the news of the shooting. Juliet met Christopher when she was 17, and he was 19, having just returned from a school for troubled youth. She described him as kind, polite and courteous, and he made a strong positive impression on her. He treated her like a true gentleman. so she could never imagine that he could commit murder. Juliet said that his parents welcomed her into their family. His mother, Susan, taught her how to apply makeup and helped her develop her dressing style. His father, John, also supported her by giving her a job at his law firm. The couple's parents supported them financially without expecting anything in return. They were happy to see the couple together. When police first encountered Christopher at the crime scene, it was shortly after he had been informed of the incident. He appeared to be very upset, and one officer noticed tears on his face. However, his initial statement to police during questioning shattered the impression of sadness. He quickly explained that he and Juliet had had dinner with their parents but left at around 9 p.m. to go to the movies. He then gave the police their movie tickets. Instead of asking how his parents were doing, he focused on justifying his actions and emphasized his alibi before any charges were brought. Police carefully reviewed surveillance footage from the cinema, which showed Christopher leaving after the movie around midnight. They noticed he immediately used his mobile phone to make a call, arousing curiosity about who he was contacting. The police quickly checked all his calls. Police later determined that Christopher had contacted a man named Garrett Kopp 331 times in the days leading up to the murder, which raised suspicions. Garrett, a police officer with a criminal record, had come to the attention of police. They suspected he might be involved in the crime. The case drew attention to Garrett's troubled past, including multiple arrests, adding to police suspicions. Police began to consider Garrett as a potential suspect. At the time of the case, he was out on bail. When police examined the weapon used in the murder, they found it to be very similar to Garrett's Glock, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Garrett had a tense conversation with the police and later admitted to attacking John and Susan. However, Garrett insisted that he did not act on his own. He said that Christopher had threatened to kill him and his son if he did not comply. Garrett insisted that the idea for the attack was entirely Christopher's. He also said that Christopher had given him the gun and had left the door unlocked, allowing him easy access to the house. The police arrested Garrett and charged him with murder, but his testimony was not enough to keep Christopher in custody. Juliet was questioned by police who believed she had more information than she was revealing. Despite their efforts, she denied any involvement and insisted on her innocence for several hours. The interrogation lasted 13 hours in total, but the police did not record it. Later, Juliet alleged that police had threatened her with arrest to force a confession and acted provocatively during the questioning. However, she eventually admitted that Christopher felt a strong resentment towards his parents for placing him in a facility for troubled teenagers. Recently, his parents tried to push him to get a job and start covering his own costs, which he found unacceptable, and this led to family conflicts. During questioning, Juliet revealed that Christopher had been planning revenge on his parents for years. He often spoke about the inheritance and how they could live without worries if he could take everything his parents had earned. However, she didn't take his threats seriously. The police had gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant for Christopher Sutton. However, by that time, he had disappeared. This was a crucial moment for the police, as they feared that Christopher might return to harm John. Fortunately, the police were able to locate and arrest Christopher, charging him with the murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father. Garrett Kopp and Christopher Sutton were eventually tried separately, and both faced the death penalty. Christopher, however, maintained that he had no role in planning the crime. The defense argued that the police were unfair, claiming that the police pressured Juliet, which influenced her testimony. After Garrett learned that he could face the death penalty, Garrett decided to cooperate with the prosecution by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, which was in his favor. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution's case took a turn when Juliet appeared in court to testify. She revealed that Christopher had often expressed anger at his parents for not giving him money, even saying that they deserved to die for their actions. The defense argued that much of Juliet's testimony was given under police pressure and should be excluded from the case. However, the judge denied this request. In court, Juliet maintained that she had been truthful during her interrogation with the police. She stated that she viewed Christopher's anger as mere frustration and never believed he would go on to commit such serious crimes. After Juliet's testimony, John, the surviving father, shared his thoughts. After hearing all the witness testimony, John believed that Christopher was capable of committing the crime. John noted that even after leaving the hospital, Christopher continued to try to manage the family's finances, which led him to believe that Christopher was involved in the crime. When it was Christopher's turn to speak, he accused Garrett of attacking their parents due to his drug addiction. Christopher highlighted several moments when Garrett was out of control due to drugs, claiming that during those times he was dangerous and capable of committing any crime. Christopher also mentioned that he kept drugs in Susan's bedroom closet. The Garrett might have entered the house to steal illegal drugs. However, the prosecutor argued that the scene did not appear to be a burglary, everything was intact, even the money and jewelry were intact. If it was a burglary, Garrett would have taken valuables. In his defense, Christopher claimed that he had changed and overcome the anger, resentment, and disappointment he felt towards his parents for sending him to a special school. He believed that he had changed for the better. After extensive deliberation, the jury found Christopher Sutton guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Christopher was shocked by the verdict because he was sure that he would be acquitted. Christopher received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, survivor John Sutton is putting in great effort to regain his eyesight. He has formed a new relationship and started a family, and at 70 years old, he continues to practice law. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellie Nessler. In the small town of Jamestown, California, Daniel Mark Driver was on trial for child abuse. One of Daniel's victims was William Nellayer, a defenseless child. William's mother, Ellie, felt that the justice system had failed to protect her son, so Ellie took matters into her own hands with a gun. The case sparked widespread debate, with some people fully supporting Ellie, while others criticized her actions. Ultimately, the discussion surrounding the case attracted national attention. Jamestown was a small, quiet town with a population of about 3,500 at the time of the incident. Ellie was the eldest of 3 daughters. Her parents were hardworking miners who taught Ellie the importance of self-reliance from a young age. As a result, she grew up to be strong and independent. During her teenage years, Ellie began to help her family by looking for work. It was a tough economic time. She took on various jobs to supplement her income. She also helped her parents by taking care of her younger siblings. When Ellie turned 20, she fell in love with a guy she met, and they quickly entered a romantic relationship. Soon after, they got married, but their marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. Her next partner was Bill, who worked as a miner. Additionally, Bill operated construction equipment, allowing him to earn a good income. They married in 1982 and soon welcomed a son named William. Bill grew up in an area that was once the center of the gold rush. As a child, he had listened to stories of old men panning for gold in the river, which inspired him to seek their adventure, even though the land was largely depleted by then. In search of better fortune, Bill and his family traveled to Liberia, West Africa, during the gold rush. While Bill was prospecting for gold, Ellie gave birth to their daughter, Rebecca. Unfortunately, Rebecca's early years were not peaceful. Suddenly, shortly after her birth, civil war broke out in Liberia. As a result, Ellie and the children returned to Jamestown, while Bill remained in West Africa, determined to make his fortune mining gold. During this time, Ellie faced numerous challenges in the United States. She received no support from Bill, and although she was a strong and independent woman, managing a household and caring for 2 young children proved to be very difficult for her. They relied on government assistance and occasional jobs that Ellie managed to find. During this period, she received support from her family and the church, which she attended regularly with her children and sister. Her mother often advised her to be self-reliant but also to carry a gun in her handbag for protection. Ellie took this lesson to heart. Despite her delicate appearance, she was always prepared to defend herself and, if needed, to take the initiative in a confrontation. This aspect of her character would later lead to tragic consequences. Ellie is very close to her children and does not let them go far. This protectiveness stems from her own traumatic experience as a child, when she was molested by an adult man. After she confided in her mother reacted violently and threatened him to leave town. This incident left Ellie with lasting psychological scars that she has struggled with throughout her life. She fears that her children may face similar dangers. When her son William went to summer camp away from home, she felt very anxious and scared. Despite her worries, William kept asking his mother to let him go to the summer camp organized by the church. Ellie was very anxious about letting her son spend time with others without her supervision. She hadn't even allowed him to sleep over at friends' houses. Eventually, her sister Jenna reassured her, explaining that she knew the camp organizers well and described them as respectable and good people. After thinking it over, Ellie finally agreed to let her son go, hoping he would enjoy himself. William spent 3 weeks at a church-run tent camp. After returning from the summer camp, Ellie noticed a change in William's behavior. William became aggressive, often sad, and stopped communicating. Ellie sensed that something was bothering him. Despite her and her family's efforts to find out what was happening at the camp, William refused to discuss it with adults. He insisted on being treated like an adult and wanted them to stop asking him questions. Younger sister Rebecca and his mother thought he was trying to imitate the older teenagers he had met at the camp. When the new school year started a few weeks later, everyone thought William was settling in well with his friends. However, when he returned to class, things did not improve. He began to withdraw from his family and became more aggressive with his classmates, rarely interacting with others. His anger often became uncontrollable, and these incidents had increased since he had been at the camp. Ellie was confused by William's changes, and it took her over a year to discover the reason behind them. Unfortunately, the truth behind it was quite heartbreaking. Daniel Mark Driver, a 30-year-old man who attended the same church as Ellie and her children, had recently moved in with his mother, who lived nearby. He was considered a good man and an active member of the church, known for his community involvement and willingness to help other parishioners. He always carried a Bible with him and could easily recite passages from it. Daniel took on the role of kitchen staff at the summer camp and also helped supervise the children, who always spoke positively of him. He is a natural psychologist. According to his parents, Daniel can help solve any difficult situation. Students often come to him to confide in him when they are in trouble. Many boys who do not have fathers consider Daniel as a father figure. With his persuasive skills, he can talk to any teenager. William experienced a significant change in his relationship with Daniel. William used to enjoy spending time with Daniel and interacting with him. But after returning from summer camp, William became noticeably anxious even during casual encounters. During this time, William often argued with his sister Rebecca, seemingly starting conflicts for no reason, and William also began to defy his mother. He had never argued with Ellie before, but now he became increasingly defiant. Occasionally, William's Aunt Jen, who was very close to the family, would take William to her home for the weekend. This gave his mother a break. About 9 months after the camp, Jen took William to her home for a weekend. During his stay, he had the opportunity to spend time with his cousins. Each time, Jen tried to discuss the major changes in his behavior, but William was quiet and avoided answering her questions. However, he later confided in her a secret, insisting that she not tell anyone, not even his mother. Jen agreed to keep it a secret. 7-year-old William shared his experience while he was at summer camp. Daniel began to behave inappropriately towards him. One day, the Daniel lured William into the woods with the promise of showing him frogs and other animals. However, as they went deeper into the woods, the Daniel began to abuse him. This abuse continued regularly, even after the summer camp ended. The boy was afraid to go to church and tried to avoid the Daniel as much as possible. The abuse began when William was 6 years old, and during this time, the Daniel threatened him, saying that he would harm William and his family if he revealed what was happening. Fearing danger to his loved ones, William kept quiet, and the abuse continued for many months. After hearing the story, Jen felt she had to talk to Ellie. She apologized to William for revealing his secret, but felt the need to take action against the rapist and put an end to his actions. Jen first spoke to her sister Ellie about what had happened to William. Ellie was shocked and blamed herself for exposing her child to such a problem. From the beginning, her maternal instincts warned her that William should not attend the camp. However, she succumbed to the pressure, leading to the outcome she feared and experienced. William worried that the man might come back and act on his threat if he found out that William had told anyone about the incident. The boy became increasingly anxious and fearful. He often came home from school in tears, telling his mother that he had seen Daniel's car in the distance. The panic attacks became more frequent, and he began to feel paranoid. He tried his best to cope, but the situation was still not good. Ellie then reported the molestation involving their son to the police. Police checked Daniel's record in a national database, discovering a worrying history of crimes involving children. In 1984, he was charged with indecent exposure to 5 boys in the San Jose area. Although he was arrested, his church community sent letters of support to him before the trial. With no solid evidence other than the boy's testimony, the judge ultimately decided to give Daniel probation instead of a prison sentence, allowing him to escape the consequences of his actions. This leniency allowed him to continue his harmful actions. Daniel then decided to move away and start over. He moved closer to his mother, where no one knew about his past crimes. Daniel also started attending church and developed a healthy relationship with a woman who had a young son. He became more involved with the children, working with them, giving them advice, and eventually got a job at a church summer camp, where he was often around children. However, the woman began to notice Daniel's unusual behavior towards her child and started to pay closer attention. She eventually asked her son if Daniel had ever bothered him, but the boy appeared confused and insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened. The mother, doubting her son's honesty and fearing he was too scared to speak up, did not dismiss her concerns. She continued to monitor Daniel's behavior. A few months later, she caught Daniel molesting her son. She then contacted a friend who was the district attorney. A background check revealed that Daniel had served 5 months in 1983 for child abuse. Concerns about him grew when William's case occurred, prompting the boy's mother, Ellie, to contact the police. At that point, the police investigated Daniel more closely and gathered evidence from new victims of his molestation. After Ellie reported the incident, the police stepped up their efforts to prevent similar crimes by Daniel. Police began questioning all the families who had come into contact with Daniel, including children who had attended the camp. Many of them reported similar experiences, which helped police understand the tactics Daniel used. He repeatedly targeted boys, gaining their trust while threatening to kill them and their families if they spoke out, which proved effective. Police identified 5 new victims in the area, including William. In 1983, charges were filed, but they were unable to arrest Daniel because he had been out of town for an extended period of time. At the time, It was difficult to track his whereabouts due to the lack of cell phones, GPS, and other tracking technology. Police suspected that he had learned of the investigation and had gone into hiding. Both Daniel and his car were placed on the wanted list, and his photo was widely circulated in the press. However, despite these efforts, it took several years to find him. Meanwhile, William's depression and aggressive behavior continued. He frequently got into fights at school, did poorly in school, and became a bully. As a result, William was expelled from several schools and transferred several times. Ellie believes her son's behavior stems from past violence that has deeply affected him. She sought help for her son, taking him to numerous doctors and psychologists in hopes of improving his situation, but nothing seemed to work. In 1993, police finally caught up with Daniel at a store in Palo Alto, California, for shoplifting. After confessing to the theft, Daniel faced charges not only for shoplifting but also for child abuse. Even after Daniel was arrested and awaiting trial, William continued to feel afraid. He struggled to accept that he would have to face his abuser in court. William would have to testify against him, but the thought of it filled him with dread. William was so anxious that the mere mention of the trial made him feel sick. In desperation, Ellie approached the prosecutor to request special arrangements for her son's testimony. She hoped William could testify without Daniel present to spare him serious emotional distress. Unfortunately, the current rules required William to appear before a jury. To address this situation, the only solution was to install cameras so that William could provide testimony from another room. He would be recorded, and the video would be shown in court. Unfortunately, the small community lacked the funds to set this up. As a result, William had to appear in court like the other boys who had also been victimized by the Daniel. The trial was challenging due to the presence of many emotionally and physically traumatized children. The boys who had already testified had experienced significant distress, but they managed to get through it. On April 2, 1993, 11-year-old William was one of the last witnesses to take the stand. Ellie tried to prepare him for his meeting with Daniel the criminal as best she could. However, when the car carrying William and his relatives arrived at the courthouse, William did not want to leave. He began to have a panic attack and vomited violently. Ellie reassured him that he needed to testify because testifying was the only way to ensure that a dangerous person would be locked up and unable to harm anyone else. William understood the importance of his testimony, but his fear made it difficult for him to calm down. Ellie, William, and the aunts waited outside the courthouse to be called to testify. During this time, they tried to comfort William and help him calm down. Suddenly, a van arrived at the courthouse and Daniel was taken out. When William saw Daniel, he felt nauseous again. Ellie stared at Daniel as he walked through the courthouse yard. She later remembered that Daniel just smirked and walked past. She felt a burning hatred for this man. As they left the building, Daniel's ex-girlfriend and her son, who was also a victim, testified against him. The woman told Ellie that things were not going well. She noted that the children were nervous and confused in their testimony. Daniel took advantage of this by highlighting inconsistencies in their testimony. He continued to put the children in difficult situations, asking distressing questions that only made them more confused. They became increasingly upset, some of them crying. This makes Ellie worried about William. Ellie fears that the situation could affect the trial, potentially allowing a dangerous criminal to escape justice and return to his former criminal ways. At that moment, Ellie Nessler suddenly realizes that she must serve justice, and Daniel must be stopped forever. Court in this county lack modern security features like metal detectors. It is easy to carry guns inside. And many people in the community, including Jen, carry weapons for self-defense. While on the street, Ellie reached into her purse and quietly pulled out a gun. She hid the weapon as they entered the courtroom, where Ellie shot Daniel 6 times. 5 of the bullets hit him in the back of the head and neck, killing him instantly. People in the courtroom panicked and fled, and police rushed in with loaded guns. Jen stepped in front of her sister, causing Ellie to throw the gun to the ground and raise her hands in surrender. She was then arrested. The shocking story of a mother staging a lynching during a court hearing quickly made national headlines. Within a week, every major media outlet had covered the incident, sparking widespread debate about the lynching. Many saw Ellie as a hero, receiving overwhelming support from local residents, especially those affected by the event. 2 local banks even set up defense funds that the community could contribute to for Ellie, leading to a rush of donations from her supporters. Items such as T-shirts that read "Good shot, Ellie" became popular and which sold well. Similar stickers could be found on cars all over the country. Despite this, Ellie couldn't be celebrated as a national hero for her actions. She was arrested and had a bail set at $500,000. This amount was provided by a guarantor from Seaman, allowing her to return home before the hearings and await trial in her own community. However, not everyone agreed with her decision, and she faced criticism from some members of society who accused her of taking the law into her own hands. Still, the majority, including the local community, viewed her as a protector of her child. Police uncovered additional details about Ellie's situation. They found that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs when she fired her weapon in the courthouse. Ellie claimed she used these substances to give herself the courage needed to endure the stressful courtroom hearings. In October 1993, she received a diagnosis of breast cancer, with doctors estimating she only had 5 years to live. Initially found guilty of manslaughter, Ellie was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, her conviction was later overturned due to the jury's misconduct. She then reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting guilt to manslaughter, and ultimately served 3 years in prison before her release. William then moved in with his Aunt Jen. After 2 years, he was finally able to communicate with Ellie, who was still serving her sentence in prison. Ellie expressed her feelings. She deeply regretted having to take someone's life, which was never her intention. However, she felt that the justice system would not be able to protect her son and other children from a dangerous criminal. The only reason she pulled the trigger was the fear that Daniel would be released again. William's life was ruined at a key moment in his growing up. He was molested and then dragged through the courts. The William became a hooligan, got involved with bad company, and lost his way. As a result, he had frequent encounters with the law, with courts and prison becoming a regular part of his life. He was first charged with a crime at the age of 14. He was incarcerated 18 times between 1999 and 2004 for various crimes. His criminal record was extensive, including charges of robbery, assault, illegal possession of a weapon, and drug-related offenses. In 2004, when he turned 23, William was living freely, had several tattoos, and resided in his family's house. He didn't have a permanent job, so, similar to his mother in her younger days, he was searching for temporary work for short periods. However, while Ellie had to do this out of necessity due to the economic crisis, for William, it was a result of his involvement in criminal activities. In 2004, he also took a part-time job with his friend David, helping to clean his house during construction and repairs. David had become disabled from working in the oil fields. In June, a dispute arose when tools went missing from the construction site, with both sides blaming each other. When the police arrived, William attacked David and beat him. Due to this incident, along with the previous charges, he was sentenced to 60 days in prison but was released after only 30 days. On July 26, 2004, just an hour after his release, he returned to his workplace. David attempted to escape but was unable to due to his disability. William then attacked David, kicking him in the head several times. As a result, David lost consciousness and died in hospital the following day. William fled the scene but was arrested a few days later and charged with first-degree murder. In June 2005, William Nessler was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rebecca was the only one to escape the tragic fate and now lives a normal life with her family and children, often reflecting on the absence of her mother and brother during important moments. She deeply misses her brother William, who always looked out for her. Rebecca believes that William would not have ended up in prison if their mother had not shot Daniel. This tragic event caused a series of unfortunate events that made their lives worse. Despite this, she does not resent her mother. She understands that her mother was confused and made a hasty decision. In the end, Rebecca feels that her mother's actions prevented many boys from facing the same fate. Ellie's life ended in tragedy. In addition to battling breast cancer, she faced legal troubles. She became involved in distributing illegal drugs. In 2002, she bought materials for making drugs from a police informant. Initially, Ellie provided some drugs to the informant, but 5 days later, when she returned to collect the pills, she was arrested after the informant reported her. Ellie confessed to her crimes and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but she only served 4 years. She was released in 2006, but sadly, Ellie Nessler passed away from breast cancer on December 26, 2008, at the age of 56. When Ellie died, William asked to be released from prison to say goodbye to his mother. But his request was denied. 2 years later, in 2010, Rebecca and a reporter visited her brother in prison. They spoke for about 2.5 hours. During the conversation, William was very reflective, reviewing everything that had happened in his life. He did not try to justify his actions or blame anyone else. He noted that he felt he had been pushed down a path of self-destruction at the age of 6, a burden he would always carry. William emphasized how public opinion affected him, especially when the case of Daniel, a rapist who was murdered in court, was heavily covered by the media. The attention affected him. The whole community knew that William was also a victim, sexually abused at the age of 6. People discussed his past, which made him feel ashamed. He doesn't want this attention, but it's hard for him to escape it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pamela Buckbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the third child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor, who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital, where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings, ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buckbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, they had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work, as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss, Calder's father. Pamela ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled, but a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended. But a new conflict arose. The custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seeing patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calders kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife, and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together, and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack, and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack, on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty. But he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, 2 different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob's lawyers hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her, and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport and Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired 2 of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob's attack, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buchbinder guilty and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michael Reese. In February 2015, around 8 p.m., the Morris Police Department received a call from a woman named Cindy Reese, 40. She reported that when she returned home from the store, she found the front door wide open. Inside, she found items scattered on the floor. Cindy attempted to contact her husband, Michael, but he did not answer. Feeling scared, she did not go further into the house. Instead, she went to a landline near the main entrance, called the police, and then walked outside. After the call, at 9:11 p.m., Cindy contacted Michael's father and informed him that their home had likely been burglarized and asked him to come immediately. Michael and Cindy lived in the Morris Center on Bank Street, right across from a police station. The police quickly went to Michael's house. When they arrived, they found Cindy standing outside looking scared. Inside the home, police found a chaotic scene, with a table overturned and furniture scattered about. They soon found Michael Reese, 40. At the back of the home, he was found dead on the floor in an unusual position. Michael had been shot in the back of the head. Michael Reese was born in July 1974 in Alabama. From a young age, he loved fishing. Michael finished high school and attended college, where he studied computer technology, eventually securing a job in that field. He was skilled with computers and often helped others. Although Michael got married, his first marriage ended in divorce due to his wife's infidelity. He didn't dwell on this loss since they had no children and continued to seek the right partner for himself. In 2008, Michael was introduced to Cindy by a mutual friend. They were nearly the same age, and a strong connection quickly developed between them, leading to a passionate romance. Cindy was born in January 1975 in Alabama. Her father served as an assistant pastor in a Baptist church, and she often accompanied him to work as a child. Growing up, Cindy was a model student who adhered to the rules. She graduated from college with a degree in accounting. In 1995, Cindy married, but her first marriage ended in tragedy in 2007 when she returned home from work to find her husband deceased. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Cindy was devastated by her husband's death. A year later, in 2008, she met Michael Reese, and they fell in love. They married on September 5, 2009, and spent their honeymoon at Disneyland. After the wedding, they moved into Michael's grandmother's house in Morris. Cindy worked as an accountant at the Jefferson County Courthouse, while Michael was a computer technician at St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. The couple had no children and, like many in Morris, spent a significant amount of time at church. Cindy, who grew up in a Lutheran family, convinced Michael to join the Sardis Baptist Church. After his baptism, they attended services together every Wednesday and Sunday. Cindy was also the music director of the church. Unfortunately, Michael received sad news when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Concerned about her health, Michael visited her often and spent much of his time caring for her. On February 14, 2015, Michael celebrated Valentine's Day with his mother, but just 4 days later, on February 18, he was tragically murdered. Michael was known as a kind and positive young man, generous and trustworthy. Police quickly opened an investigation into his murder. Michael had been shot once in the back of the head. Inside the house, everything was in disarray. The police suspected that the Michael family was targeted for a robbery that went wrong. On the table, there was still uneaten fast food. However, investigation revealed no evidence of a break-in through the front door. Hours after the murder, Cindy Reese was taken to the police station for questioning. She explained that on February 18th, she and her husband, Michael, had gone to work during the day. In the evening, Michael picked her up and they visited Cindy's mother. Around 6 p.m., they attended a church service, which ended at 7 p.m. They then stopped at a cafe to order some fast food and take it home. As they were getting home, Cindy suddenly remembered that she needed to buy groceries and told Michael that she would go and get the groceries and hurry home. Michael took the fast food and left. Cindy went to the supermarket and was gone for about 30 minutes. When she returned home, she found the front door wide open. Worried, she looked inside and saw things scattered everywhere. She called out to her husband but got no answer, which scared her, and she decided not to go any further into the house. Worried, she immediately called the police and walked out. At that time, she did not know that her husband, Michael, was dead. Cindy reported that a .38 revolver and some jewelry were missing from their home. When asked who might have killed Michael, Cindy said that as she was driving near her home, she saw a strange man wearing a black hoodie walking down the street. She also shared that she and Michael were planning to have children and had even added a room to their home. They were in the process of renovating, with the assistance of a contractor. Cindy speculated that this man might be involved in the murder. The interrogation lasted for several hours. During this time, Cindy listed all of her close friends, co-workers, and acquaintances that she and Michael had interacted with. Police noticed that when Cindy mentioned an old family friend, she appeared very happy. Meanwhile, the entire town knew that Cindy was having an affair. Although everyone suspected her secret relationship, Cindy denied it and refused to admit to any adulterous behavior. Her lover was Jeffrey Brown, the pastor of the Baptist church. Church members mentioned that they had seen Jeffrey and Cindy kissing in the car several times, but for some reason, no one spoke up about it. During questioning, Cindy denied having an affair with Jeffrey, claiming that they were just friends who occasionally walked around town together. Jeffrey was also questioned. He stated that on the evening of February 18th, he was in another city, 50 miles away from Michael's family home, and had nothing to do with Michael's murder. Jeffrey openly admitted to having a romantic relationship with Cindy. They first met in August 2013 when Jeffrey was a candidate for pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. At the time, Cindy was a pastor and worship leader at the church, and she had been married to Michael for 4 years. Jeffrey was also married to a woman named Noelle and had 2 children. Michael's family developed a close friendship with Jeffrey. They spent time together and went on vacations. However, in late 2013, a secret affair began between Jeffrey and Cindy. This affair did not go unnoticed by church members, leading to rumors. As a result, Jeffrey was forced to leave the Baptist church because the leadership believed that an adulterer was not fit to be a pastor or a role model for the congregation. Before becoming a pastor, Jeffrey was a Marine, a police officer, and then a hairdresser. At the time of the Michael family tragedy, he was working as a pest control specialist. Jeffrey and Cindy continued their affair, and Jeffrey divorced his wife, Noelle. However, Cindy chose to stay with her husband, Michael. During questioning, Jeffrey expressed his frustration with Cindy's unwillingness to leave Michael, claiming that Michael had abused her. Despite the accusations, Jeffrey denied any involvement in the murder. After questioning Jeffrey, Cindy confirmed that she was indeed having an affair with him. She revealed that her relationship with Michael was fading. He spent too much time on his phone and playing video games, often neglecting her. On weekends, Michael enjoyed fishing and the couple rarely had intimate moments. In the summer of 2014, Cindy confessed to her husband, Michael, that she had cheated on him. Although he was understandably upset, Michael assured her that he did not want a divorce. The couple made an effort to repair their relationship. To celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, they visited Disneyland, hoping to rekindle the romance they once had. Michael was aware that Jeffrey, Cindy's lover, had intentions of winning her over, which made him fearful for his family's well-being. While being questioned about her relationship, Cindy talked about her time with Jeffrey. When asked if Jeffrey could hurt Michael, she replied, "Of course not, Jeffrey is a very religious man." The investigation into the case is still ongoing. Police have not found any witnesses or surveillance footage to confirm that a stranger wearing a black hoodie was seen walking down the street on February 18th. A contractor who was doing renovations for Michael's family has a solid alibi. He was at the church at the time of the crime. The initial theory of a robbery was dismissed because there were no signs of forced entry. While some items were missing from the house, most of the jewelry was intact. It appears the killer intentionally created a mess by overturning tables, throwing blankets on the floor, and making it look like a robbery. Cindy claimed that she was in the store at the time of the murder. She said she bought orange juice and ham. When she checked out, she added a few small items to her cart and paid for everything. The police found it odd that Cindy would rush to the store when their refrigerator was already full. They had eaten ham and orange juice for breakfast, so it seemed like there was no real need to buy those things. Additionally, Michael and Cindy bought fast food for dinner. Cindy loved good food and her relatives often commented on this. People commented that Cindy would not let her hot dinner at home get cold and would not go to the store without eating her favorite hamburger and fries first. Police went to Cindy's workplace. In her office, they found a wedding photo of her and Michael displayed on a shelf, framed with hearts. Below, next to her computer, was a photo of Cindy with Jeffrey. Police also discovered financial documents showing that Cindy had paid for the apartment where Jeffrey lived, using her credit card. Jeffrey had frequent financial problems. In addition, the couple shared a bank account and Cindy had always supported Jeffrey financially. Police also discovered cell phone records that showed what happened on the day of the murder. Evidence from Jeffrey's cell phone showed that Jeffrey was near Michael's home at the time of Michael's murder, specifically at a gas station. Police also uncovered a disturbing incident that occurred a few months before Michael's death. Jeffrey had spoken to 2 of his co-workers, who were drivers, and asked if they could kill the man who had murdered his wife. Jeffrey offered to pay the 2 co-workers with money in his car as payment, but did not specify who the target was. He only mentioned that the man drove a white Honda Accord and worked at St. Vincent's Hospital. The description matched Michael Reese, but his co-workers declined the offer and reported Jeffrey's alarming request to the police. Less than a month after Michael was murdered, Cindy Reese and Jeffrey Brown were arrested on March 11, 2015. Neither of them admitted guilt. Police believe that on the night of the murder, Michael and Cindy returned home with takeout and intended to have dinner together. When Michael went to the back door to let the dog in, Cindy shot him in the back of the head with a revolver she kept at home. After the shooting, she created a mess, took several valuables, and went to the store. On her way, she disposed of the gun and jewelry, then returned home and called 911. Police are convinced that both Cindy and Jeffrey were involved in the murder, with Jeffrey likely being nearby at the time and possibly helping Cindy afterward. After Cindy's arrest, she was released from prison and lived freely while awaiting trial. She chose not to post bail for Jeffrey, who remained in custody. Just days before his trial in August 2016, Jeffrey sought a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Cindy. He said that Cindy had instigated Michael's murder, explaining that she was afraid to divorce her husband because she was concerned about how her family would react. Jeffrey mentioned that Cindy had previously expressed a desire to kill her husband, which he initially interpreted as a joke. On the night of the murder, he claimed to have overheard everything that happened between Michael and Cindy on his cell phone. He reported hearing the couple arguing both in the car and at home, as well as gunshots. After Cindy killed her husband, she asked Jeffrey to help her get rid of the gun. They arranged to meet at a gas station, where she gave him the gun along with some jewelry, which he discarded. Cindy's trial began in November 2016, and she denied all of Jeffrey's allegations. She admitted to meeting Jeffrey at the gas station but said he asked her to come because he was out of money for gas. Cindy said she gave him $15 to help him. During the trial, she maintained that she and Michael had no intention of getting a divorce and wanted to work on their marriage. She also claimed that she no longer had any feelings for Jeffrey and accused him of stalking her, her family, and their home. Cindy's arguments were dismissed, as Cindy had not provided financial support to Jeffrey while at the gas station. Police also discovered that Cindy had frequently exchanged explicit photos with Jeffrey, suggesting that their relationship had not ended. Cindy's lawyers argued that she had no motive to kill her husband and placed the blame squarely on Jeffrey. The defense portrayed Jeffrey as obsessive, impulsive, and manipulative. No traces of gunpowder or blood were found on Cindy's body or clothing, and the angle of the gunshot wound indicated that the shooter was taller than Cindy, about the same height as Jeffrey. To this day, it remains unclear who shot Michael and what exactly happened that night. Prosecutors argue that Cindy did the killing, with Jeffrey helping her dispose of the weapon. In 2016, Jeffrey Brown was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2036. On January 11, 2017, Cindy Reese was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her family believes she is innocent and is determined to fight for her release. In 2019, Michael's parents discovered that Cindy had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a lower security facility near the site of the murder. Michael's family went to court and successfully had her returned to a maximum security prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Justice Garrett. Justice Garrett, a teenage girl from Florida, USA, suddenly disappeared after school. As police investigated the case, they discovered the motive and the horrific events surrounding her disappearance. They were increasingly shocked by the brutality of the perpetrator, the most brutal in the history of the county. It had been just 3 weeks since Justice's 16th birthday. That day, she had overslept and woken up later than usual, causing her to miss the school bus. Her mother, Danielle, then 37, was busy getting her 5-year-old daughter ready for kindergarten and couldn't help Justice get to school. Danielle believed Justice could handle herself. Justice was going to return home by the school bus in the evening as usual. But she didn't return home at the scheduled time. Initially, Justice's family wasn't concerned because she had many friends and often stayed late with them after school. However, as time went on and she still hadn't returned, her mother and stepfather began to worry. They assumed she might be spending the night at her best friend's house. Since they needed to wake up early for work, they went to bed without waiting for her. But when morning came, Justice still hadn't returned home. Danielle grew impatient and worried about her daughter's whereabouts. Unable to reach Justice by phone, Danielle decided to contact the police for help. The police took the missing person report seriously and began an investigation. Police checked out places where Justice might have been, as they often see teens staying with friends before returning home. However, Justice's mother sensed something was wrong because Justice had not contacted family, which worried her. Police considered the possibility that Justice might have run away. Danielle said Justice often spent weekends with friends, and she often helped her mother take care of her younger sister and would not disappear without telling anyone. Justice always dealt with her problems instead of running away from them. and she always discussed any difficulties with her mother. Danielle was worried because all Justice's belongings were left at home. She believed something terrible might have happened to her daughter, so she insisted on starting the search right away. Despite the police's reassurances, Danielle's anxiety grew. Her daughter had never hung out with bad friends, and it was unusual for her to run away or avoid problems. Even when she was with friends, she would call her parents to let them know. However, she did not return any calls or texts. She was friendly and sociable, and did not use drugs or alcohol. It seemed completely impossible that she would just run away without telling anyone. Police checked Justice's database and confirmed her mother's story. She had no criminal record and there were no reports of her being in an accident. Police began searching for Justice by interviewing several teenagers, classmates, and acquaintances. Some said they had seen her sleeping in the cemetery, while others said she had moved in with a secret boyfriend. In fact, Justice had no boyfriend and had never been to the cemetery. None of these claims were true. Police interviewed everyone who knew Justice, including her teachers and classmates. They discovered that she had not been to school that morning. A review of surveillance footage along Justice's route and a check of her phone's geolocation showed that she left home around 7:25 a.m. to go to school, but she disappeared about 30 minutes later, on her way to school. What happened to Justice during that time? For days after she went missing, on April 17th, a man called the police. While out jogging, he noticed a strange, unpleasant odor coming from the edge of the trail, which piqued his curiosity and prompted him to head toward the woods. After walking a few meters, the man accidentally discovered a body. He then called 911. The police quickly arrived and discovered a female body that showed signs of severe decomposition. Although there was some minor damage caused by animals and the hot and humid weather. Most of the damage was caused by a chemical substance. Forensic experts determined that it was a type of bleach that had been poured on the victim's body, likely to cover up the evidence. The identity of the deceased could not be determined on the spot and laboratory analysis was required. However, the police suspected that this could be Justice, the person everyone was looking for. Police confirmed the identity of the body as Justice after DNA analysis. Her body was found in a wooded area near Delanda, about a 30-minute drive from her home in Sorrento. Her upper body was badly decomposed, exposing her bones. Her lower body was less damaged, suggesting that she had been exposed to fewer chemicals. Although the exact cause of Justice's death could not be determined due to the condition of her body, it appears that she died from strangulation. Evidence showed that her pants had been pulled down to her ankles and her sweater pulled up to her neck, suggesting that a sexual assault had taken place. Unfortunately, bleach destroyed much of the evidence, making it difficult to prove this motive. It was clear that she had suffered multiple blows to the face, as her nose was broken in several places. Police interviewed the jogger who discovered the body and reported it at 9:11 a.m. He provided important information about the incident. The jogger said that on the 16th, while running on the trail where the body was later discovered, he noticed another person in the distance. He believed it was a man based on his build, but he was unable to provide further details because the person ran away when he heard the jogger approaching. This unusual behavior caught the jogger's attention, but he did not go any closer to the area or see the body that day. However, he returned several days later when he noticed a foul odor. The investigation confirmed that the jogger was not involved in the incident. He passed a lie detector test and had an alibi for the day Justice went missing. To gather new information, police carefully reviewed surveillance camera footage along the entire route Justice took, especially at the bus stop where she was supposed to board. Justice's mother initially claimed that her daughter had walked to school by herself. However, police soon discovered that this was not true. In fact, her stepfather, Robert, had offered to drive Justice to school that morning. Police were suspicious of Danielle's lie about how her daughter got to school, so they approached her more cautiously. This time, she changed her story, admitting that Justice had not walked alone. Robert had driven her in his car. She explained that she had lied because Robert's driver's license had been suspended and she feared he would punish her if she told the police the truth. And that Danielle thought her little lie wouldn't get in the way of finding her daughter. Unfortunately, the deception in this case made it difficult for the investigation to piece together what really happened. The police requested the school surveillance camera footage, which covered the parking lot. This is the location where Robert was supposed will drop her down. However, the camera was malfunctioning at the time and no footage was recorded. Therefore, it was impossible to confirm whether Robert dropped Justice off or not. However, multiple witnesses reported that Justice did not come to school and that no one had seen her that day. The only person confirmed to have seen Justice alive was Robert, and only he knew what really happened. The police brought Robert in for questioning. Eventually, he began to talk. On the day of the incident, Robert claimed that he never took Justice to school. Instead, he drove her to a nearby town at her request and dropped her off at the entrance of the town so she could meet a male friend. Robert suspected that this friend might be her secret boyfriend, whom she was dating without her mother's permission. In order to build a better relationship with Justice and gain her trust, Robert decided to comply with her request. However, Robert did not know the name or any details about the friend Justice was meeting. Justice then assured Robert that she could get to school by herself and planned to return by bus, so he felt that everything was fine. He could not wait for her because he had to go to work in the Volos district, and he did not have much time. Unfortunately, Danielle and Robert were unable to provide any useful information. The police then turned to Justice's friends, who all confirmed that she had recently started talking about a guy she met online. He had shown a lot of interest in her and texted her frequently, which she shared with her friends. However, Justice felt uncomfortable with his excessive attention and her friends believed that Justice would not date him. The police examined the Justice's social media accounts, looking closely at her likes, comments, recent subscriptions, and conversations. They discovered one account that had been in frequent contact with Justice over the past few months and showed various activities related to her. This account belonged to an 18-year-old man, whose profile picture featured a muscular young man. He had been flirting with Justice, expressing interest in getting to know her, and complimenting her. Despite mentioning that he lived nearby, police were unable to find anyone who looked like him, and none of her friends recognized him. Justice did not respond to his persistent messages, choosing instead to ignore him. However, police believe the social media account is crucial to solving the case. Police then conducted a thorough search of his social media accounts. They discovered a phone number associated with his account, but instead of belonging to an 18-year-old, it was registered to a middle-aged man named Robert Kern, Justice's stepfather. This revelation shocked the police. When they approached Robert again, he, who had initially been cooperative, suddenly changed his attitude and refused to communicate. The police were determined to find answers, especially since Robert had lied, and now all the evidence pointed to him as the prime suspect in Justice's murder. Despite his protests, police arrested Robert Kern. However, social media interactions are not sufficient grounds to charge someone with murder. At the time, Robert was very close to the family, as he had been dating Justice's mother since the previous fall. He often stayed overnight at their home and kept in close contact with the entire family. There was no evidence of inappropriate behavior toward Justice. Robert denied any wrongdoing and dismissed the idea that he had harassed Justice. He suggested that his frequent compliments were meant to encourage Justice, arguing that receiving attention from a man could be a compliment. However, this explanation seems implausible, as Justice ignored his messages and she thought he was weird for discussing him with her friends. The police, looking for evidence against Robert, decided to interview Justice's close friend, Rachel. Rachel explained that their friendship had recently become close, as Justice often stayed overnight at her house. Rachel mentioned that a few months before the tragedy, Justice had stayed so often that it aroused suspicion. It seemed that Justice was trying to avoid going home. Robert had also been staying at Danielle's house quite often in recent months. Could his presence have contributed to Justice's reluctance to go home? Rachel reported that Justice had spent nearly a month at her house in the weeks before her death. She observed that Justice had become increasingly anxious. Previously calm, she now flinched at any accidental touch and implied that she was afraid of Robert, her stepfather. Rachel recalled seeing Robert on the day Justice disappeared. She described him as looking very uneasy, to the point where she actually felt scared. This made her understand why Justice liked to stay at her house every night. Police decided to take a closer look at Robert's background, focusing on his social media interactions and cell phone calls. What they discovered was disturbing. Robert had a significant criminal record, including 2 burglaries dating back to the early 2000s. Recent search history showed that he had looked up drugs that could cause unconsciousness, such as chloroform, and that he had purchased the drug. He also spent a lot of time studying maps, especially the nearby woods, likely in search of a suitable place to hide a body. He also researched methods for disposing of evidence. After learning that bleach had been used on Justice's body, police ran a geolocation check on Robert's cell phone on the day Justice went missing. They discovered that he had not been driving and had not dropped Justice off at a bus stop or school. Instead, Robert went into a wooded area where Justice's body was later discovered. Police reported that Robert's cell phone was not working for about an hour during this time. Initially, Robert claimed that he was on his way to work, but this was false. In fact, he took Justice into the woods, where he attacked, raped, and killed her. Justice was later charged with murder and was held in custody until his trial began. The exact motive behind the crime was never revealed, as Robert did not reveal it until the very end of the trial. The prosecution argued that the crime was murder with the intent to commit rape. Robert chose not to testify in his own defense during the trial, but he never admitted to any wrongdoing. However, the prosecutor's office had enough evidence to charge him with murder. Robert's troubled criminal history was presented during the trial. He was first arrested in May 2019 in New York State on fraud charges and was held in the county jail. It was mentioned that in 1999, he had committed burglary and breaking and entering, which resulted in an 18-month prison sentence. 3 years later, he was arrested again for burglary and served a year in prison. The prosecution later proved that Robert's testimony was completely false. He mentioned that he dropped Justice off near the school early in the morning and that he worked as a carpenter. However, both of these statements were proven to be lies. After being caught lying, Robert tried to create more excuses. But they were all designed to fool the police. They were able to accurately track the movements of both Robert and Justice. They compared the timestamps on Robert's cell phone and the searches on his phone, which showed that he had been planning the crime for a long time. The prosecution argued that Justice had no chance of surviving from the beginning because Robert had intended to kill her. Vegetation from where Justice's body was found in Robert's car, although he claimed he had never been in the area. However, he had in fact been there at least twice after the murder. He returned to the location on April 16 to pour a chemical on the body to destroy evidence of the crime. At that time, he was spotted by a jogger. The prosecutor's office attempted to prove that Robert's actions were sexually motivated, arguing that he had intentionally kidnapped Justice in order to rape and harm her. Robert had been keeping tabs on Justice for a long time, and she tried her best to avoid him, so she was rarely home. Danielle, Justice's mother, was devastated by her daughter's murder. In her testimony, she said that Robert had discouraged her from calling the police immediately after Justice's disappearance, convincing her that Justice was just staying at a friend's house. He also pressured her to lie, claiming that Justice had gone to school by himself. At first, the Danielle did not understand why he made such demands, thinking that he was afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After reviewing the case documents, the jury reached its decision in just 30 minutes. They found Robert Kern guilty of first-degree murder of Justice Garrett. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years for attempting to obstruct the investigation. Throughout the trial, he never admitted his guilt and showed no remorse for his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he maintained his innocence until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the Northern Cape province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Sharetha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snakebite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own, while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Sharetha experienced the luxuries and wealth. She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Sharetha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Sharetha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Sharetha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, She began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Sarita was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Sarita agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Sarita at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Sarita discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Sarita firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Sarita's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Sarita join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Sarita and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Sarita enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Sarita began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, Medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Saratha's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Saratha hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Saratha had grown apart and were living separate lives. Saratha began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poeter, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Saratha called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Saratha tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poeter. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Saratha called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Saratha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Suretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, but she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Suretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Suretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Suretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Amantal Bareki to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Amantal. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Amantal were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Amantal and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Leon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Leon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Amantal refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Amantal and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Leon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Léon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Léon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Léon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Léon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Léon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Léon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Suretha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Suretha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants to removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques Van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Inrich Williams and Amantal Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Suretha Brits, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Léon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Léon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Léon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Suretha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Teresa Parker. Teresa Parker was born on September 9, 1965, to Claire and William. The family initially lived in San Diego, California. They later moved to a home in Lafayette, Georgia, where they settled permanently. Teresa had 5 siblings. She was the middle child. Her friendly and kind nature made her popular with all her relatives. In 1984, Teresa graduated from high school. Soon after, she married her first love. After a while, the couple separated in the early 90s. Teresa completed her training and became a switchboard operator for the city police department, quickly becoming a favorite of the police officers. One of those who loved her was Sam Park, born in 1956 in Lafayette. He had an older sister named Caroline and a younger brother named Kenneth. Sam had a close relationship with his father. Overall, he was a kind and intelligent person. In his spare time, he enjoyed exploring the outskirts of the city, hunting and fishing in the many freshwater bodies nearby. When Sam turned 18, he joined the military and later became a police officer. In the early 1980s, his younger brother Kenneth admired him and chose a similar career, serving in the Marine Corps before joining the police department. Inspired by Sam, Kenneth decided to go to law school. For Sam, becoming a police officer was a lifelong dream. During his career, he once saved a child from a burning building. When Teresa, a beautiful 20-year-old new switchboard operator, joined the police department, she caught the attention of many of the officers, including Sam. They quickly became friends, and before long, Sam asked her out. Their relationship blossomed and they became a couple. However, some of Teresa's relatives noticed that Sam sometimes had difficulty controlling his jokes and could easily get angry. Both Teresa and Sam had experienced failed relationships in the past. Teresa had been married once, while Sam had been married twice. He saw his new relationship with Teresa as an opportunity to start over. The couple married on September 11, 1993. Teresa, 28, married Sam Parker, 37, who had just been promoted to city police sergeant. Although the early years of their marriage were happy, their relationship began to deteriorate over time. They argued frequently, and the conflicts were severe. There were concerns that Sam might have violent tendencies. They later filed for divorce in August 2006, after nearly 13 years together. However, by the winter of 2006, they had reconciled and decided to continue their relationship. In March 2007, Teresa decided to end their relationship and went on vacation to Mexico without her husband. After returning from vacation, Teresa started looking for a new place to live in another city, while Sam would stay in their old house. She took a few days off to move and settle into her new home. The next day she moved her belongings to a new apartment. Then she visited her sister, Christina, who now lived near her. In the evening, Teresa left Christina's house. She drove her SUV back home. At around 10:30 a.m., she visited her good friend Rhonda's house. Although she had planned to go to her old house to move her belongings, she decided to stay longer to make sure that Sam had gone out and did not see her. She wanted to avoid any arguments. Rhonda was surprised that the once loving couple were now avoiding each other. Teresa revealed that Sam had always been short-tempered and aggressive, especially when he was drinking. They then ended their conversation. Rhonda went to bed while Teresa went to her ex-husband's house. The next morning at 6 a.m., Rhonda called her. Someone answered the phone, but there was silence on the other end. After a moment of silence, the call was disconnected. Rhonda tried to contact Teresa several more times but only got her voicemail. Rhonda called all the numbers Teresa had used, including her work number, but none of them worked. Concerned, Rhonda then contacted the police station to request a welfare check on Teresa, who did not return her calls. In the workplace, everyone was worried about Teresa's absence because she had never missed a shift before. A police team was sent to check on her at her ex-husband Sam's house. About half an hour after the call, around 6:30 a.m., the police arrived at Sam's house but got no response when they knocked on the door. They then searched the area, looking through the windows. They hoped to find Teresa's car to make sure she was okay, but only Sam's pickup truck was in the garage. The police then went to Teresa's new apartment, but no one answered the door there either, so they left without any information. The police later found Teresa's SUV near her ex-husband's house. No one saw her, even Sam tried calling her many times to ask about her. Initially, her relatives weren't too worried, thinking that Teresa was busy arranging her new apartment and might not have heard her phone while cleaning. However, it was unusual for her not to answer any calls, as that was not her typical behavior. The day passed without any updates on Teresa. Christina had a hunch that Teresa was in danger. Teresa's family then officially reported her missing to the sheriff. From the beginning, the police treated the case as a top priority. They sent several officers to talk to Teresa's ex-husband, Sam, to gather information about the events leading up to her disappearance. The Georgia Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved in the case. They had known about Teresa's family's domestic violence for years. On May 4, 2002, police were called by Teresa's neighbors to report that Sam was drunk and extremely aggressive. He had been drinking all day and was violent toward Teresa. The patrol officer observed a bruise on Teresa's face, indicating that she had recently been beaten. Despite this, she chose not to file charges against her husband. The next incident occurred on April 27, 2003, while they were on vacation in Florida. They were dining at a restaurant when her husband became intoxicated and began threatening to kill Teresa in front of others. She then attempted to leave the parking lot in her car. At that point, Sam pulled out his service weapon and fired several shots into the car. Even after the police arrived, he continued to verbally abuse her and denied firing his weapon. When Teresa accused him of something, Sam threatened to commit and end his own life. As a result, Sam was taken to a mental health facility in Florida, where he was held for 72 hours for evaluation. Doctors were particularly concerned about his disturbing statements, such as his claim that he knew how to dispose of a body without leaving a trace. Additionally, Sam had extensive experience concealing evidence. He is very familiar with the local area, including the least frequented locations. Kayla, Sam's ex-wife, described him as an alcoholic. When he drank, he became aggressive and violent. She recounted an incident where he smashed a glass on the floor in a fit of rage. Then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her through the broken pieces. He then chained her to the bed and only released her in the morning when he left for work. He also strangled Kayla and threatened her with a gun. She eventually escaped the abusive relationship by moving to another city to get away from him. The police were eager to solve Teresa's case quickly, especially since it involved 2 police officers, which would affect the reputation of the police department. They began by investigating Teresa's new apartment and Sam's house. When police arrived at Teresa's apartment, they found a note on the door from the courier saying that Teresa's order could not be delivered. Inside the house, everything appeared normal, with several cardboard boxes filled with Teresa's belongings. The police then searched Sam's home 5 times, which frustrated him, especially when they confiscated his hunting weapons for examination. Ultimately, the searches yielded no clues to Teresa's disappearance. All of her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. There was no activity on her bank accounts, so the possibility of her running away was rejected. At the end of March 2007, the entire Lafayette community was in confusion. Teresa had disappeared and no one knew where she was. This left everyone worried and many avoiding going out after dark. Those close to her suspected that Sam had something to do with it. However, Sam also expressed concern about Teresa's disappearance. He explained that she wanted to avoid divorce proceedings, so she ran away. However, this explanation did not seem reasonable. Hundreds of residents volunteered to assist police in searching for Teresa. Police made numerous attempts to locate her. Divers searched all local waters, and areas such as underwater caves were explored with robotic cameras. Posters with Teresa's image were placed on billboards and flyers were distributed throughout the community. During the search, police found no sign of her. The situation was further complicated by the rugged terrain, which included dense forests, numerous small lakes, and mountains. The police questioned everyone who knew Teresa. Within a week, the police had interviewed over 100 people. During these interviews, it became clear that Sam had a volatile personality, was extremely jealous, and lost control when he drank. Meanwhile, Teresa was determined to save their marriage. She kept her husband's abuse a secret and did not share it with anyone, although her relatives suspected that there were serious problems in their family. In March 2007, everyone was relieved when Teresa decided to divorce her husband, and they supported her decision. However, Sam's family had a different view of him. They described him as cheerful and kind, and although he struggled with alcoholism. Sam's brother claimed that most of their conflicts were actually caused by Teresa's actions, rather than by Sam. Only Sam's younger sister spoke up, saying that he did have a quick temper and, unlike Teresa, he often escalated conflicts instead of stopping them. On March 25, police interviewed Sam. At the time, he was not considered a suspect. However, during the interview, he provided information that contradicted what police knew. Sam claimed that he saw Teresa's car in the parking lot when he went fishing that morning. This claim was dismissed by police, as they did not find her car at the house at the time. The car later appeared near the house, but no one witnessed how it got there. He also falsely claimed that he had not contacted Teresa, but police discovered several calls he had made to her that morning. While this may seem like a small lie, it aroused suspicion, leading the investigation to take a closer look at Sam. Sam presented a different version of events. He suggested that Teresa may have run off with her boyfriend, Elvis, whom she had allegedly met on a recent trip to Cancun, Mexico. To investigate this claim, police traveled to Mexico. They interviewed hundreds of people, including tour guides, hotel staff, and local residents. However, they found no clues or evidence to support the story, nor could they identify her boyfriend, Elvis, which led them to doubt his story. Despite growing concerns about the case, Sam continued to deny any involvement in the crime. On April 3, police arrested a man in connection with Teresa's disappearance. To the shock of many, it was not Sam who was arrested, but his colleague, Ben Chapin. Police kept the details of the arrest secret. Ben was eventually released and cleared of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Sam was fired from the police department after 25 years of service due to his abusive behavior toward his ex-wives. He was permanently banned from returning to the force after his suspension. An internal investigation into Sam discovered explosives in his personal locker. The investigation into Teresa's case took months. Police were initially puzzled when Teresa's car returned to a parking lot near Sam's home. They discovered blood stains and signs of thorough cleaning in the car. Additionally, the trunk mat was missing. DNA analysis showed a sample belonged to Teresa, while they also found Sam's DNA in the same location. The police decided to arrest Sam. On February 4, 2008, nearly a year after Teresa's disappearance, police arrived at Sam's home, opened the door, and were arrested without resistance. The next day, he faced multiple charges, including murdering Teresa, invasion of privacy via computer, violation of public servant's oath, and invasion of citizen privacy. He was held without bail. Despite these charges, Sam maintained his innocence. Teresa's family, meanwhile, continued to insist that Sam was responsible for her disappearance, insisting that she feared him and did not want to return home. Despite the murder charges against Teresa, police have yet to find her body. Under state judicial practice, the chances of the prosecution winning the case are slim. Traditionally, few murderers have been convicted in cases where the victim's body is missing. As a result, the prosecution relied heavily on witness testimony, including Sam's ex-wives and Teresa's relatives. On August 17, 2009, in Walker County Superior Court, the prosecution alleged that Sam Parker had a history of violence against all of his ex-wives and was involved in an attempted murder. Sam had once confessed to his doctor that, as a police officer, he knew how to effectively hide a body. The prosecution detailed an incident that occurred when Teresa came to Sam's house to collect some of her belongings. They then got into an argument. During the argument, he killed Teresa, put her body in the trunk of her car. He then disposed of her body and carefully washed the car to remove any evidence. He then called his friend Ben and confessed that he had shot Teresa and planned to hide her body somewhere where it would never be discovered. He asked Ben to keep this conversation a secret. Ben shared his story just before the trial after reaching a deal with the prosecutor to drop all charges against him. Ben was supposed to testify against Sam. The prosecution said that during the time Teresa was missing, Sam suffered scratches on his hands and face. The prosecutor's office believes that these scratches were caused by Teresa in self-defense. Sam's attorney argued that he did not touch Teresa or her car. Teresa may have injured herself and then cleaned up the evidence and threw away an old rug before disappearing. The defense argued that all of the prosecution's evidence was circumstantial. Sam accused Teresa of having an affair. He even investigated her while she was on vacation and discovered that she had booked a double room, even though she was traveling alone. She also used a false name when booking the room. Sam suspected that Teresa had secretly met with his colleague, a police officer who had searched their home 5 times, but his colleague denied the allegations. Ultimately, the choice of the double room could simply have been because it had a large bed for comfort, or perhaps there were no single rooms available at the hotel. Sam still denies any involvement in the crime, arguing that there is no strong evidence to prove his involvement in the case or confirm Teresa's death. The jury was deadlocked and unable to reach a verdict, leading to the decision to retry. On December 3, 2009, 2.5 years after Teresa's disappearance, Sam Parker was convicted of murder, and he was also charged with obstructing and violating the oath of office of a civil servant. Sam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Sam continued to maintain that he had nothing to do with Teresa's disappearance. After the trial, he requested a new trial, but his appeal was denied. 3.5 years after Teresa's mysterious disappearance, on September 20, 2010, 2 farmers found a human jawbone in a cornfield near the Chattooga River in Georgia after a flood. A search party later discovered a nearly complete skeleton, and dental records confirmed that it belonged to Teresa. Her death was finally officially recognized. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head from a hole in the skull, not a gunshot wound. The discovery site was 100 kilometers from her home and on the route that Sam had taken to fish. Was confirmed by geolocation data. This led the police to conclude that Sam was responsible for Teresa's murder. Despite this evidence, Sam Parker maintained his innocence. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison.